I would ask you, if you're able, please stand together with me as we read from John chapter 18, the first 11 verses. Hear now the word of God. When he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side, there was an olive grove, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the grove, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Who is it you want?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." "I told you that I am he," Jesus answered. "If you're looking for me, then let these men go." This happened so that the words that he had spoken would be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away, for I did not drink the cup. For shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me?" Thus far, the reading of God's word. You may be seated. Now, I've told you several times, I think, I've told you about one of my wife's favorite things to watch. We watch it on YouTube, on the television. And I think she did it for me because I like to go camping out in the wilderness, and I'll do it by myself sometimes. And she wants me to maybe not go off by myself anymore because we're watching scary bear attacks. And there's several of them. It's an interesting YouTube video. If you want to watch it sometime, you can. But you just go on YouTube and type out the scary bear attacks, and I'll put you there. But it is interesting. He'll do bear attacks back from the 1800s, but he will do a post on a bear attack sometimes the very next day that it happened. You know, I don't know if you were aware, but it had been several decades since there was a bear attack in Arkansas, and over the past month or month and a half, there have been two individuals killed because of bear attacks. And you just wouldn't think about that in Arkansas, but it happens. Now, when we watch this, the people who are attacked, and he tells the story, some of them are always prepared. And he always talks about how they might prepare themselves, especially if they're going into country where they know there are bears. And he talks about them carrying a firearm with them or bear spray with them. And some people are very prepared for what they might encounter when they go out in the wilderness and bear country. And they carry both bear spray and a firearm. And still, some people aren't prepared for it. Even some people who think they're prepared for it, maybe carrying bear spray or a firearm. This is something I've never understood, but they'll carry bear spray and they put it in their backpack as they're carrying it. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If your bear's coming on you, he's coming quite quickly. And even when some have it on the holster on their side, they are not able to get it out in time. Sometimes he tells stories about people and the bears are coming at them, and they just kind of freeze. They don't know what to do. They've made preparations, and they've thought it through their mind what they would do if this ever happens. But when it happens, they're not able to do it. They're not prepared. And they're not in control of the situation. And usually the bear gets them. There's another, it was kind of a television series that I like to watch. It was a guy named Stephen Ranella. And he was known as the meat eater. And he would go hunting, and he did a whole lot of hunting in the Rockies and several other places. And he would kill whatever animal he kills at the time. At the end of the show, he prepares it and they eat it. Maybe they eat it out in the wilderness right there. Anyway, this was a big deal, and this was Stephen Ranella's life doing this, going hunting and killing the game that he goes after and then eating it. And he even did hunting for bears. He would hunt for grizzly bears. I never saw him kill a grizzly bear. He killed some black bears. And did see an episode where he and one of his friends are out in the Rockies somewhere, and a brown bear whose cubs are with her charged them. And that was a scary thing. And his buddy had a shotgun and just shot it up in the air, and the bear swerved away and left. And that time he thought he was prepared. But then later he tells a story about when his whole crew was there. He's got a big crew filming the episodes with him. And they're having dinner one night, and he's preparing a sandwich, and this grizzly bear comes running right into their camp. And he says it just ran right past him, just scared the living daylights out of him. He always thought what he would do when a grizzly did this, but all of that went by the wayside. Two of the individuals in his camp had sidearms. They were prepared for such a thing, but when the grizzly came through, neither one of them pulled their guns. In fact, one of them had a gun, had a walking pole, and the grizzly charged him, and he swung the walking pole and hit him. And the grizzly didn't kill anybody or maim anybody there. One of his crew actually jumped on the back of the grizzly, and he ran several yards with the guy on his back and got rid of him. But Stephen Ranella, one who's always in this sort of stuff, and you think that he would always be prepared, and he talks about being prepared for bear attacks, sort of things. And yet, when the crisis came, they were not ready for it. They were kind of scared and didn't do what they thought they might do. They found out that they weren't necessarily, with all of their preparation, they weren't necessarily in control of their situation. So sometimes when people are charged by grizzlies, they just freeze, thinking, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to prepare, and it doesn't work. John tells us a story in the passage that we just saw. John, who was an eyewitness to the story, tells us kind of a unique perspective that we only find in John's gospel. What John tells us that happens here is only in John's gospel. But in this, he shows us that Jesus, even in the midst of this incredible crisis in his life, Jesus is in control. James Boyce's commentary on this passage, he talks about Jesus being in control. He says, even at the very moment of the arrest, he showed his control over the circumstances. For he demonstrated power towards the soldiers, grace towards his own disciples, and mercy to those who were perhaps unwittingly, in this case, his enemies. And so this morning, as we look at this passage, and as we think about the crisis that Jesus is going through at this point, I want us to see how he is in control. And we're going to borrow Dr. Boyce's outline here, that he shows his control by showing power towards the soldiers, grace to his own disciples, and mercy to his enemies. And so that's what I want us to consider this morning as we look at this passage. And so the first thing that I want us to consider from this passage is the power of Jesus over these soldiers that have come. Now, we've seen the power of Jesus in some amazing ways throughout the Gospel of John. In chapter 2, we see him turning water into wine at this wedding, and where they've run out of wine. And so his mother comes to him and says, they're out of wine. And he says, what does this have to do with me? My time hasn't yet come. And yet he tells the servants, do whatever he tells you. And you know that he has them pour these water jars, these great big 20-gallon water pots full of water. And he says, dip some out and take it to the guy who's over the wedding party here. And it's turned to wine. We see his amazing power of turning water into wine. As we read throughout the Gospel of John, we continue to see his power over people who are blind. They come to him, they can't see a thing, and Jesus heals them. In one case, he even heals a man who was born blind. And that's quite an ordeal. People talk about there's never been anyone at that time who was born blind to receive sight this much later in their lives. And yet Jesus does that. We see him healing the lame, those who were laid up on a bed and had been there that way for years and not able to motivate on their own. We see him healing them and them getting up, and he said, take your mat and walk, and they do. People who are deaf can't hear. We see in the Gospels Jesus healing them. We see his power over all of these things. Amazing story about Jesus' power over all is when he gets in the boat with his disciples to go across the lake, and he lays down in the bottom of the boat and falls asleep, and this huge storm comes up. And these guys have been fishermen all their lives, been on the water since they could walk, and they think that this storm is going to swamp them, that they're all going to die with this storm. So they wake up Jesus and say, don't you care that we perish? And he turns to the storm with the wind and all the waves, and he just says, peace, be still. And even nature has to obey him, and the water becomes like glass. So we see his power in turning water to wine and healing the blind and the lame and the deaf. We've seen his power in calming the storm. We see his power in raising people from the dead. We've seen it a couple of times in John, most notably in John chapter 11, where Mary and Martha call Jesus to come because their brother Lazarus, who they love, is sick and he's about to die. And they say, please come and heal him so he doesn't die. Well, he delays. When he gets there, sure enough, Lazarus is dead. They've already buried him, put him in a tomb, rolled the stone in front of the tomb. And he's been there for 4 days. And Jesus, says to Martha, this is a great place where Jesus says, I'm the resurrection and the life. If you believe in me, even though you die, you will live. And so Jesus goes and he raises Lazarus from the dead. He goes to the tomb, says, roll away the stone, and they do. And then he says, Lazarus, come forth. And he comes up out of the grave alive. And these, in so many ways, we've seen Jesus showing his power over all of creation already. And now in this passage, we see Jesus showing his power in yet another way. In a way, he shows his power in which he has complete control over this situation. When others would fall away, others would say, yes, this is what I'm going to do. And then when the time comes, they would lose all strength that they had. And that doesn't happen with Jesus. In this passage here, we see Jesus exhibiting complete control over the events in the garden. I want you to think for a second, Jesus and his disciples, they've just had the last of the Passover meal. Jesus has instituted the Lord's Supper, showing that the Passover meal now is changing to the Lord's Supper. And they're in there, and Jesus at this supper also tells, he knows Judas is going to betray him, and he says, go on and do what you're going to do quickly. And he knows Judas is going out right then to get the religious leaders and the soldiers, whoever they need, to come and grab him. So he knows that this is happening, and he prays. He prays here. And so Jesus and his disciples go across this little creek, kind of is dried up most of the year. They go across that and they go into Gethsemane, to this place where there's this garden that's there. Probably has a gate, probably a locked gate, and Jesus has access to it. And he goes in there and goes with his disciples. Now, he'd been there several times with them, so Judas knows that this is a place that Jesus would go. Now, Jesus knows that Judas would know this, and he knows that probably if he goes and gets those who are going to come get him, this is where they're going to go. And Jesus doesn't say, well, just tonight, guys, we're going to go to another place. He doesn't do that. He doesn't back away from it. He says, this is the place we're going, knowing that that is the place they're going to come to get him. Now, when he gets there, he goes to pray. And, this is where he takes Peter, James, and John, says, come with me a little further. And they come, and he says, please stay with me and encourage me, lift me up here and continue to pray with me. He goes on, and he prays, and we see in Luke's gospel that he comes back after an hour of prayer, and Peter, James, and John are asleep, and he wakes them up and says, can't you stay awake and pray with me for 1 hour? This happens 3 times. We just kind of assume that each time maybe is 3 hours. And so Jesus is praying there for 3 hours, knowing that this is the place where Judas is going to bring these people to get him, and yet he delays. He continues to pray. And this is where in other Gospels we see Jesus praying, saying, Lord, if there's any other way, let this cup pass from me. Yet not my will, but your will be done. And Jesus is prayed up in this. And so at this point he's saying, this is not, I'm looking towards the cross. I'm despising the shame that is there. But Lord, I'll do it if this is the way you want me to do it. And having prayed that, knowing that they're coming to get him so that this would be what's going to happen to him. And Jesus delays, waits for them to come. Other times in the Gospels, we see individuals wanting to kill Jesus. In Luke chapter 4, after Jesus preaches his first sermon, he says some stuff to them that they find quite offensive, and they take him out of the synagogue to the edge of town where there's this big cliff. They're going to throw him off the cliff where he will fall to his death. And it says Jesus kind of passes through their midst. They can't find him. He's gone. He doesn't submit to them killing them at this time. In John chapter 8, Jesus has been talking to them, and they say what he's saying is blasphemy, and they pick up stones to stone him to death, and all of a sudden he's gone. They can't find him. He's not submitting himself to death at these times. And yet at this time he knows they're coming for them, knows what they're coming to do is to get him, to bring him to where he would be killed. And he's prayed. He understands that this is God's will, and that's what he wants most of all. And so he's still in complete control. And when they come, in verse 4, they come. Jesus knows what they're coming for, knows they're coming after him. But in verse 4, knowing it, he doesn't hide. He doesn't say to his disciples, now's the time for us to depart. Let's go somewhere else because this is not going to turn out well. No, instead, he goes out to meet them. Verse 4, Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, who is it that you want? Who is it that you want? Verses 4, and then he re-asks the question in verse 7. And that when they tell him, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, what does he say to them? We see it in verse 5. He says, who is it you want? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. They replied, I am he. And Jesus said, I am he. That's what the NIV, our text, and most English versions are going to say, I am he. If you look it up in Greek, however, you look it up, and the Greek words when Jesus' response are ego eimi. That's the Greek word for it. And it means I am. The Greek doesn't have any he. It doesn't say I am he. It says I am. Ego eimi. If you look back in the Old Testament, in Exodus chapter 3, in the burning bush, when God comes to Moses in the burning bush, and and God tells him, I want you to go to my people. I want you to tell Pharaoh to let them go. And Moses has a question. If I go and I go to your people and they say, who sent me? What should I say? And you remember the words from the burning bush? He says, I am. Tell them that I am sent you. In the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, that word's ego eimi. I am. When Jesus responds to this, when Jesus responds to them by saying, I am, this is exclusive to John's Gospel. What happens here in verse 6. John ought to know he was there. He was an eyewitness to this. When he tells them this, when he says, I am, it says, when Jesus said this, verse 6, I am, they drew back and fell to the ground. I'm looking at that. It goes, is this some sort of Greek idiom that they would talk about and just kind of being drawn back? But no, it seems to be that John's being literal here. When Jesus said, I am, they're coming back and falling to the ground. What an odd detail, simply because Jesus responds with, I am. What could cause such a reaction? Several commentators have suggested at this point they see brief glimpses of who Jesus was. And that was as who he revealed himself to them. I am, Jesus said. Again, I want to... James Boyce quotes another commentator, and he says, the other commentator says, I am inclined to think that here, as there, he's thinking of the transfiguration, he says, though under such widely different circumstances and to such various issues, there was a moment, a little rending of the veil of his flesh, and an emanation of some flash of his brightness that always tabernacled within him. And therefore, just as Isaiah, when he saw the king in his glory, he said, woe is me, for I'm undone. And I believe Isaiah in that passage fell to the ground, thinking, I'm undone. I've seen the Lord of glory. I've seen him in his holiness. And here Jesus has revealed himself as the I am, as the one in the bush back then, as the one, even though he doesn't use the term in Isaiah chapter 6, he is the one seated on the throne. He reveals himself briefly, it seems, as the one who, up on the Mount of Transfiguration, he's transfigured. And they're able to just briefly get a glimpse, the veil being removed, to see what the true I am looks like. And that was so astonishing to them that they fall to the ground as a result. Jesus himself at this point has power over the crowd. The soldiers came to take him, and it's interesting, the soldiers come with their weapons, but they also come with lanterns and with all these lights. They come in the darkness to find the light of the world, but they come bringing lanterns and lamps. That's kind of an interesting little thing here. But they're coming to the light of the world. And when they come, even though they've got the weapons, and there's a lot of them, by the way. We don't know exactly how many. Some have suggested in the hundreds have come. You've got Roman soldiers. You've got the temple police who have come as well. There's quite a number of them. And them with all of their weapons have come to take Jesus. And when he says, I am, and they get a glimpse, they fall back. He's showing he's got power over these guys. He's got all the power he needs. Knowing that he's going to take them, knowing that they're coming to take him will mean his life, yet he goes. And that great chapter, John chapter 10, where Jesus reveals himself as the Good Shepherd, says the Good Shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. And he goes on to say in verses 17 and 18 that no one takes my life, I give it up willingly. These guys have come to take the life of Jesus, but they're not doing it. He's got power over them. They've just experienced that. No matter how many of them or how many weapons they bring, they don't have power over Jesus. He's got the power over them. Again, to quote from Dr. Boyce, he said, if he had been unwilling to die, no amount of troops or weapons could ever have forced him. He could have walked away as he did on numerous former occasions. We see here in this passage, Jesus is in control. He's got power even over those who have come in great numbers, who have come with such great weaponry. He's still the one in control. And he's not going on their say. He's going on his say. He's the one who's going to give up his life for his sheep. Well, we go on. We've seen the power of Jesus towards the soldiers, showing he's in control here. We see not only that in verses 8 and 9, we're going to see the grace of Jesus towards his disciples in this passage, showing that he is still in control in the midst of this. Into verse 7, when he's asked them, who is it you want? Again, they say Jesus of Nazareth. In verse 8, he says, I told you that I am he. Jesus answered, if you're looking for me, then let these men go. This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. I have not lost one of those you gave me. A couple of other places in the Gospel of John, he's also reminded us that all that the Father has given him, he's not going to lose any of them. And Jesus shows his love for his own. In Mark chapter 14, there's a scene, Mark tells a story that's going on at this time. And in Mark chapter 14, there's a young man who's there. He's kind of a disciple of Jesus. Most think that it was probably Mark himself. And they go after him and they grab at him, and he's got a coat on, and he leaves his coat and he runs away naked, and they can't get him. So they're obviously there for Jesus and his disciples as well. And Jesus, showing his grace and his great love for his disciples, did not want them to be harmed. John is calling attention to Jesus' words earlier in John 6 and John 17, where he's saying, I'm not going to lose any that you give to me. Jesus cares about those who are his. Cares so much, he says, I'm not going to lose any of them. You remember Jesus in John chapter 10 saying, you know what? All those who are my sheep, I'm going to save them in the last day. I'm going to raise them up. I'm going to. He says, those who are in my hand, no one can take them away. My Father is stronger than any. They're in his hands, and no one can take them. Jesus is showing his grace in this passage by reminding us that those who are his, he cares about so much that he doesn't want the harm that he's about to see and come to them. Jesus, in a sense, is placing himself between him, between his enemies and his disciples. He's saying, don't harm them. Don't harm them. You came after me. Just come get me. That's what Jesus does for his people, isn't it? He places himself between the harm that would come to them and them. Jesus telling those who came to take him, saying, come after me. Don't come after them. And that's what's going to happen the very next day. He goes to the cross, right? When Jesus goes to the cross, mankind is sinful. All man is sinful. Everyone who's born from Adam, that sin of Adam's has come down on us, and we've all acted on it. We've all got our own sin. And that separates us from God to the extent where God says punishment, ultimate punishment is coming on you. God's going to pour out his wrath. And that word is used in Romans chapter 1. It's used in Ephesians chapter 2. God's wrath is going to be poured out on them because of their sin. God's wrath is poured out on sin. And Jesus says, I am going to get in the middle. I'm going to stand in the way. And when I die on the cross, I'm taking the wrath that the Father has for all sinners who are believers, who are my children. I'm taking that wrath upon myself. And they don't have to take it. Jesus gets in the way. Much like if we're, I don't know if you guys have ever done this. I've done it myself, cooking, and take something out of the stove and put it up on, or the oven and put it up on top of the stove and forget that it's still hot the next minute and reach out and touch it. It doesn't take long to recognize it's hot, does it? You want that oven mitt there. It gets between you and the heat. That's what Jesus is doing. He's getting between these enemies of his who want to kill him, and probably his disciples too. He's getting in the middle, showing his grace. I'll take it. You just come after me. I'll take it. And Jesus goes to the cross, bearing the wrath of the Father, poured out on him so that all the sins, this is a judicial thing here. We've broken the law. And judgment needs to come on us for breaking the law. And Jesus says, I'll take that judgment so that they don't have to. Amazing grace. That's what this is. This amazing grace that Jesus shows to his disciples here, just as he shows it to you and me, those who are his children, those who believe in him and trust in him. And Jesus says, I'm not going to lose any of them. And he's just reminding us here. John's just reminding us this is how he does it. He's not going to lose any because he takes the burden. He takes the wrath upon himself, which is really for us. Well, we've seen the power of Jesus towards the soldiers. We've seen the grace of Jesus towards his disciples. Thirdly and finally, I want you to notice the mercy of Jesus even to his enemies. We find it in verses 10 and 11. We see, then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. And Jesus commanded Peter, put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me? And Luke's telling of this event where Peter cuts off Malchus's ear says Jesus tells him to put his sword away, and then he touches his ear and is healed. Here's his enemy, this one who's come to get him, to take him away, to be killed. And Jesus is showing mercy to him. He didn't deserve it. We often think that we must strike out at our enemies, otherwise they're going to do us harm. And that's kind of what Peter was doing. He had told Jesus he would never leave him, and he was ready to stand up for that. Even with these great crowd of soldiers in front of him, he's ready. He takes out his sword and cuts Malchus' ear off. And can you imagine Peter's reaction at this point when Jesus says, "Put your sword away"? And then he reaches out and touches his ear and he heals it. He goes, "You're undoing the good I just did." And Jesus knows, "No, I'm showing mercy." Can you imagine Malchus' reaction? "I just lost my ear, and then it's back. And this guy I'm about to take him to be put in before a kangaroo court where he'll be tried and sentenced to death." What kind of reaction would that be? Was it Peter's threat to this guy or Christ's compassion which would have been more likely to win Malchus to the Lord's side? Maybe that we need to look at Jesus here showing mercy to his enemies and what he's doing here to take care of them. And that's going to be quite impressive to those who are on the other side. To those we might consider our enemies. How can we win them over? Kind of win them with love, don't you? You win them with mercy. It's not what they necessarily deserve, but we show them mercy. That's what Jesus has done even to his enemies at this point. Jesus is in control of the situation. We might not have been. We might have frozen. We might have fallen apart. And we might fall apart when situations similar to this come to us in this sort of situation. But Jesus doesn't. He was in control of the situation. He knew that what was happening was God's will. He'd even prayed about it. "Lord, not my will, but yours be done." And he talks about a cup in this prayer. He says, "Lord, if there's any way, take this cup from me. And yet not my will, but yours be done." And even here in verse 11, when Jesus has told Peter to put his sword away, he says, "Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me?" Well, that's a cup of wrath. And Jesus knows it's the cup of wrath, and knows that it is something that, as the author of Hebrews says, he looks forward to it and just despises the goriness of it and sees all that's going to happen there. He despised the shame. And yet, being in control, he says, "This is the Father's will, I'll do it." He takes that cup of wrath. And taking that cup of wrath, he's standing between us and the wrath of God for us. That judgment. There's another cup mentioned in Scripture. It's found in the Psalms, and it's the cup of salvation. Jesus takes the cup of wrath on himself, bearing the wrath of God for my sins, so that I might be able to take that cup of salvation, know the joy of life with him forever. This morning, if maybe it's the first time you've heard of such amazing grace, someone who would show such mercy to those who are his enemies. Well, we were all enemies of God at one point, and God shows us mercy, but he shows us grace too. He shows us grace. It even Scripture even tells us that he is right now ascended to heaven, sitting on the right hand of the Father, and he's praying for us. If you're a child of his, he's praying for you, saying, I'm not going to lose you. Father, don't let me lose him. And he's not going to. You can rejoice in that. If this morning you've been saying, I'll try to be good enough, I'll do what I need to do in order to make it into heaven. And when I get there, and if God should say, why should I let you in? I'll just have him look at all my good works. I went to church. I gave my tithe. I helped out other charitable organizations. I said nice things to people. I did. And God's going to say, that's not good enough. In fact, that's offensive to me because I provided a way for you, and you said, I don't want that, I'll do it my own way. But if you come recognizing that it is Jesus' word, it's Jesus' righteousness, Jesus' goodness, not yours, and you turn to him, and you trust in his work for your salvation, then this message is for you. The salvation is for you. The fact that Jesus will never let you go. He's not about to lose you. Hopefully this morning you know that. And if you don't, then I just encourage you to look to Jesus. Let's go, Lord, in prayer. Father,